The storage facility manager stumbled backward, knocking over his coffee mug. His face had gone completely white. He reached for the phone with trembling hands, nearly dropping it twice before managing to dial. "Security, I need you at Unit 7B immediately. And someone call the police. Do not let anyone leave this building." He looked at me like I had just handed him evidence of a federal crime instead of my dead grandmother's old music box and a rusted key. The same music box my stepmother threw in the dumpster 2 days ago, calling it worthless junk that belonged in a landfill. She was so certain it meant nothing. Turns out some secrets have a way of surfacing, and some of them carry receipts. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Megan Foster. I'm 28 years old, and until that morning, I thought the most exciting part of my week would be finishing my taxes before the extension deadline. I work as a staff accountant at a mid-size firm in Portland, Oregon. Nothing glamorous, the pay is decent but not impressive. My apartment is small, my car is older than some of my coworkers, and I spend most Friday nights watching true crime documentaries with my cat, Mr. Whiskers. But I'm good at my job because numbers don't lie to me. I see patterns, I ask questions, and I never, ever let inconsistencies slide. My family has always found this exhausting. The funeral was on a Saturday. My grandmother, Helen Foster, had passed away at 87 years old. She had spent her life running a small antique shop in downtown Salem, the kind of place that smelled like old wood and history, where every item had a story if you asked the right questions. She knew the value of things, the real value, not just the price tags. Everyone assumed she had nothing left, just an old woman in an old house, surrounded by dusty memories. That's certainly what my stepmother wanted everyone to believe. The service was brief, efficient, and cold. Exactly Linda's style. My stepmother has always treated emotions like inconveniences, obstacles to productivity. She organized the whole thing like a corporate merger. 45 minutes for the service, 30 minutes for refreshments. Then everyone disperses. No lingering. No unnecessary sentiment. The finger sandwiches were from a place that clearly believed bland was a flavor profile. My grandmother would have risen from her grave just to critique the presentation. My stepbrother Ryan arrived 20 minutes late in a car that cost more than my annual salary. He said traffic was terrible. We live in Portland. Traffic is always terrible. But the funeral home was 3 blocks from his condo, so that excuse held about as much water as a colander. He barely looked affected. Then again, Ryan has never been particularly skilled at emotions that don't directly benefit his bottom line. He hugged his mother, shook a few hands, and spent most of the reception checking his phone, probably monitoring whatever scheme he was running this month. Ryan loves talking about his business ventures. None of them ever seem to have addresses or websites. I stood in the corner, watching my family perform grief like dinner theater, and I thought about my grandmother. Helen Foster was an antique dealer for 50 years. She could look at a piece of furniture and tell you its entire history, where it was made, who owned it, what secrets it held. She used to say that every object tells a story if you know how to listen. Her favorite saying was this: "Patience reveals what haste conceals." I never quite understood what she meant by that, not until now. 3 weeks before she died, I visited her at her house. She was weak, her body failing, but her eyes were sharp and focused, burning with something urgent. She grabbed my hand with surprising strength and pulled me close. Her voice was barely a whisper, but every word was deliberate. "The music box," she said. "In my bedroom closet. The dancing ballerina. Only you, Megan. Promise me." I promised. I didn't understand, but I promised. After the funeral service, the family gathered at her house. Linda was already walking through rooms, talking about estate sales, calculating square footage, discussing how quickly they could list the property. Ryan nodded along, occasionally offering suggestions about maximizing value. They had clearly discussed this before, probably while Grandma was still breathing. I slipped away to her bedroom. The closet was exactly as she had left it, organized with the precision of someone who spent decades categorizing treasures. I found the music box immediately, sitting on the top shelf behind some hat boxes. It was beautiful, Victorian era, with a porcelain ballerina that would spin when you wound the key. I remembered it from my childhood. Grandma would play it for me when I couldn't sleep, the tinkling melody filling the darkness with something like magic. I brought it out to the living room, curious, wanting to share this memory with someone. That was my mistake. Linda saw it before I could even speak. Her reaction was immediate, too fast, too aggressive. She crossed the room in 4 steps, snatched it from my hands, and barely looked at it before walking to the kitchen and dropping it directly into the trash bag. "This is junk," she said. "Old garbage that should have been thrown out years ago." "Don't go through her things, Megan. It's not appropriate." Ryan smirked from the doorway. "Always so sentimental, aren't you, Meg?" They exchanged a look, quick, almost invisible, but I saw it. I've spent 6 years as an accountant. I've seen that look before. It's the look people exchange when they share something they don't want discovered. When someone is getting too close to something they desperately need to keep hidden. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying my stepmother's reaction. If the music box was worthless, why was she angry? Why not just dismissive? Why did she need to throw it away so immediately, so forcefully? And I kept thinking about my grandmother, her sharp eyes, her deliberate words. She was an antique dealer for 50 years. She didn't make mistakes about value. If she hid that music box and told only me about it, there was a reason. People only react with hostility when they're protecting something. At 4 in the morning, I made a decision. I was driving back to that house. That music box was still in the trash, and I was going to find out why Linda wanted it destroyed so badly. The drive to Salem took 45 minutes in the darkness before dawn. I kept the radio off. I needed to think. My grandmother was many things: patient, methodical, observant. She spent 50 years evaluating objects, identifying authenticity, spotting fakes. She noticed things other people missed. She did not hide music boxes and whisper cryptic instructions unless there was a purpose. And my stepmother did not throw things away with that much aggression unless she was terrified. I arrived at the house just as the first light was breaking through the clouds. No other cars, no one else around. Perfect. I let myself in with the spare key Grandma kept under the ceramic frog by the back door. The house was silent, heavy with absence. I went straight to the kitchen. The trash bag was exactly where I remembered. I pulled it open and started searching. There I was, a professional accountant with a CPA license, elbow deep in garbage at 5 in the morning, like some kind of deranged raccoon in yoga pants. My grandmother would have understood. My therapist would have needed an extra session. The music box was near the bottom, underneath paper plates and wilted flower arrangements from the service. I pulled it out, wiped it clean, and examined it properly for the first time. The porcelain was chipped in one corner, but otherwise intact. I wound the key and watched the ballerina spin, the melody plinking out its familiar tune. Then I noticed something wrong. The bass felt too heavy, uneven. I turned it over and found a small panel that shouldn't have been there. I pried it open carefully, my heart pounding. Inside was a key, old, brass, with a number etched into the head, 7B. And beneath the key, folded into a tiny square, was a piece of paper in my grandmother's careful handwriting. "Store safe facility, Cedar Street, Unit 7B. They don't know about this. Everything you need is inside. Trust no one in the family. Only you, Megan." I read it 5 times. They don't know. Meaning Linda. Meaning Ryan. My grandmother had hidden something from her own family. She had trusted only me to find it. I photographed everything immediately. The music box, the note, the key. I uploaded the images to 3 different cloud accounts. Working in accounting teaches you certain habits. Physical evidence can be destroyed. Digital backups are permanent. I drove home with the music box in my bag and questions burning through my mind. The first call came at 9 in the morning. Linda, her voice honey-sweet, dripping with manufactured concern. "Just checking on you after yesterday," she said. "Such a difficult day for everyone." I waited. More was coming. "You didn't take anything from the house, did you?" "Everything belongs to the estate now. We need to inventory it properly before the sale." I lied smoothly. "Just one of Grandma's old photo albums. For memories." There was a pause. I could hear her calculating, weighing whether to push further. Then her voice relaxed. "Good. That's fine. But don't go digging through her things anymore, Megan. Some things are better left undisturbed. Your grandmother wasn't well toward the end. Her mind was slipping. She wasn't always coherent." I said nothing, but inside, I was screaming. 3 weeks ago, my grandmother looked me directly in the eyes and gave me precise instructions. The music box, the closet, only me. That wasn't a confused old woman. That was a woman with a plan. That was someone who knew exactly what she was doing. The second call came that evening. Ryan, who hadn't voluntarily contacted me in 2 years, suddenly wanted to catch up. My stepbrother calling to chat was about as natural as a shark offering swimming lessons. The last time Ryan initiated contact was 4 years ago to ask if I could co-sign a loan for him. I couldn't. He didn't speak to me for 18 months. "Hey, Meg," he said, his voice too casual, too friendly. "Mom mentioned you were asking about Grandma's stuff. Just wanted to make sure you're handling everything okay." "I'm fine," I said, "just processing." He made a sympathetic sound. "You know, Grandma didn't really have much left. The house, some old furniture. Mom and I already discussed it. She's handling the estate, I'm managing the property. You don't need to worry about any of the details." There it was. They had already divided everything. Linda gets the liquid assets, Ryan gets the real estate, Megan gets nothing. They assumed I would simply accept it. They assumed I wouldn't look closer. "Just let it go, Meg," he added. "You know how Mom gets. It's not worth creating drama." After I hung up, I sat in my apartment and analyzed the timing. Linda called at 9. Ryan called at 7 in the evening, 10 hours apart, coordinated. They were checking what I knew, confirming their stories aligned, making sure their lies matched. They were afraid of something. This is exactly why I document everything. Every conversation, every date, every detail. Working in accounting teaches you that memories can be manipulated, but records are permanent. I wrote down both calls word for word. Time, duration, exact phrasing. I looked at the key again, at my grandmother's note, at the storage unit number that promised answers. Tomorrow, I was going to that facility. I was going to find out what my grandmother hid, and whatever Linda was so desperate to keep buried, I was going to expose it. I took a personal day from work, which my manager approved without questions. One of the benefits of never calling in sick is that people don't interrogate you when you finally do. The drive to Cedar Street took 20 minutes. StoreSafe was a large facility on the edge of an industrial area, the kind of place with orange rolling doors and 24-hour surveillance. I walked in carrying the key, my ID, my grandmother's death certificate, and documents proving our relationship. I expected nothing significant, maybe some old furniture she wanted me to have, maybe family photographs, maybe just closure. The young man at the front desk smiled when I approached. He took the key, examined the number, typed something into his computer. His smile vanished. He excused himself, made a phone call in the back room, spoke in hushed tones I couldn't hear. 15 minutes passed. I sat in the lobby watching the clock, starting to feel foolish. Maybe Linda was right. Maybe this was nothing. Maybe I had driven across town for empty boxes and disappointment. I sat there so long I memorized the safety poster on the wall. Apparently, I should report suspicious activity. Little did I know. Then a man in a crisp shirt appeared, mid-50s, with silver-streaked hair and the kind of expression that suggested he had seen things. He introduced himself as Marcus Webb, facility manager. He asked me to accompany him to his office. His hands were slightly unsteady when he took the key from me. He examined it like it might be radioactive. Then he sat down heavily in his chair and released a long breath. "Miss Foster," he said carefully, "this unit is flagged in our system." I felt my stomach drop. Flagged? That word never means anything positive. But he continued, "Not because of anything you've done, because of its history," he explained. The storage unit had been rented in 2011. My grandmother had paid for it in cash, 10 years in advance. The contents had been untouched, undisturbed, for 13 years. But the unit had been flagged for multiple reasons. In 2017, someone attempted to access this unit, Marcus said. They had documents claiming power of attorney for Helen Foster. They had what appeared to be her signature, authorizing them to inventory the contents. Our verification protocols flagged inconsistencies. The signatures didn't match our records. Access was denied and the attempt was logged. My mouth went dry. Who? Marcus looked at his paperwork. The person who attempted access was listed as Linda Foster. He paused. Is she a relative of yours? My stepmother. My stepmother tried to access this unit 7 years ago. She failed. But she tried. Marcus made more calls. A woman from their corporate security department arrived. They retrieved records from their archives. The picture that emerged was devastating. The unit contained my grandmother's private collection. Items she had acquired over 50 years. Pieces too valuable to keep in her shop, too precious to risk. Antique jewelry, rare collectibles, estate pieces she had purchased and never resold. The estimated value, based on her own detailed inventory kept inside the unit, was approximately $2.3 million. But that wasn't all. Mixed in with the inventory documents was a thick folder labeled Evidence. Inside were bank statements, transaction records, and a detailed log in my grandmother's handwriting documenting every suspicious withdrawal from her accounts over 8 years. Dates, amounts, account numbers, forged signatures. 8 years of meticulous documentation. My grandmother had known. She had known everything. Marcus looked at me with something like respect. "Your grandmother filed a complaint with us in 2018, he said. She claimed her daughter-in-law was stealing from her. She said no one would believe her because she had been convinced to give Linda financial power of attorney after a minor stroke. She said she was trapped. We couldn't help her without law enforcement involvement, and she said the police wouldn't listen." He paused. "She said she was building a case, that one day someone would find this unit and finish what she started." I sat in that office holding my dead grandmother's secrets, and I finally understood. Helen hadn't given up. She hadn't surrendered to confusion or helplessness. She had spent over a decade building evidence, preparing documentation, waiting for the right moment. And she had left the key with the one person she trusted to complete what she started. Me. Marcus reached for his phone. "Miss Foster, I need to contact our corporate security team, and we'll need to involve law enforcement. This unit contains evidence of serious financial crimes." I nodded slowly. I had come here expecting nothing. Maybe some old furniture? Maybe sentimental items? Instead, I found $2.3 million in hidden assets and proof that my stepmother was a thief. And somewhere, I was absolutely certain my grandmother was smiling. The police arrived within 2 hours. 2 detectives from the Economic Crimes Unit, carrying notebooks and the kind of expressions that indicated they had encountered this before. Elder financial abuse, they called it. One of the fastest-growing crimes in the country, and the perpetrators are almost always family members. The lead detective was a woman named Sandra Coleman, late 40s, observant eyes, direct manner. She had been working financial crimes for 12 years, and she told me something that stayed with me. "These cases devastate me every time," she said, "because the victims are trapped. They depend on the people stealing from them. They love the people hurting them. And when they try to speak up, nobody listens." She looked at the evidence folder in my hands. "Your grandmother fought back the only way she could, with documentation, with records, with patience. The investigation accelerated after that. Marcus provided the facility's records. The 2017 access attempt was documented in detail. The forged signatures, the fraudulent authorization, the security flags that prevented entry. Everything was preserved in their digital archives. But that was only the beginning. 4 days after my visit to the storage facility, I received a phone call that changed everything. The voice on the other end was elderly but steady. He introduced himself as Theodore Patterson, attorney at law, 81 years old, and Helen Foster's friend for over 30 years. "Your grandmother gave me specific instructions," he said. "If she passed away, I was to contact you. Only you. No one else in the family." She was adamant about that. I drove to his office that afternoon. It was a small practice in a quiet part of Salem, the kind of place where attorneys still had wooden desks and framed credentials from decades past. Patterson met me at the door. He was tall, slightly stooped with age, but his handshake was firm and his eyes were knowing. "Helen and I were friends for 30 years, he said. "We met when she appraised some antiques from my late mother's estate. She was the most observant person I ever knew. When she came to me in 2016 and told me what was happening, I believed her immediately, because Helen didn't make accusations carelessly, and she never came without evidence." He led me to his office and placed a thick folder on the desk. "Your grandmother spent 8 years building this," he said. She knew no one would believe her while she was alive, so she prepared for afterward. I opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside was everything. Copies of the forged power of attorney documents, side by side with samples of my grandmother's actual signature. The differences were subtle but unmistakable once you knew what to examine. The letter formations were too precise, too consistent. Linda had traced her signature from existing documents, and she had done it well enough to fool casual observation, but not well enough to fool a security verification system. And not well enough to fool an antique dealer who had spent decades authenticating documents. There were bank statements, transaction records, a detailed timeline documenting every unauthorized withdrawal, every transfer she hadn't approved, every lie Linda had told to obscure her theft. Dates, amounts, institutions, 8 years of careful documentation. And at the bottom of the folder, in a sealed envelope, was a notarized sworn statement dated 2020. I read it slowly, my grandmother's voice echoing in my mind with every word. She described everything. How Linda had maneuvered to gain control of her finances after her stroke in 2009. How Linda had exaggerated her cognitive issues to doctors, implying she was developing dementia when she wasn't. How Linda had gradually isolated her, monitoring her communications, controlling her visitors, limiting her access to information. How Linda had systematically stolen from her for years while performing the role of devoted caregiver. Her final words in the statement hit me like a physical blow. I am of sound mind. I know exactly what I am doing. I am leaving this evidence for my granddaughter, Megan, because she is the only one who will pursue the truth. She has always asked the questions that made others uncomfortable. I trust her to finish what I could not. I sat in Theodore Patterson's office and let the tears fall. Not grief tears. Something deeper. Something that felt like recognition. My grandmother had seen me. Truly seen me. In a family where I had always felt like an outsider, an afterthought, she had recognized something genuine in me, and she had trusted me with the most important thing she possessed. Not just valuables, justice. Detective Coleman called me the next day with additional information, and this time, it wasn't about Linda. "We've been tracing the money," she said, "following where the stolen funds went after they left your grandmother's accounts. And we discovered something interesting about your stepbrother Ryan. Golden child Ryan. With his expensive lifestyle and mysterious business ventures and smug certainty that rules didn't apply to him. He didn't just receive money from his mother," Coleman continued. "He created a company, Cascade Antiques LLC, registered under a variation of his name. Over $400,000 was laundered through that business over 6 years. He wasn't a passive recipient, he was an active participant. My stepbrother, who had told me to let it go. My stepbrother, who had laughed at my sentimentality. My stepbrother had helped his mother steal from my grandmother and built his entire lifestyle on stolen assets. His apartment, his car, his investments, all of it was stolen money hidden behind paperwork and family deception. But the revelations weren't complete. Coleman's team ran background investigations on everyone involved. Standard procedure, she said, and they discovered something in Linda's history that illuminated everything. In 1998, Linda's father had passed away. The man had approximately $150,000 in retirement savings. When his estate was settled, there was almost nothing remaining. Other family members had raised concerns at the time, but couldn't substantiate anything. The money had simply disappeared. Linda had done this before, to her own father, 25 years before she did it to Helen. And my grandmother had known. That was why she never trusted Linda. That was why she had been so meticulous, so prepared. She had recognized the pattern. She knew what Linda was capable of. And she had spent her final years ensuring Linda wouldn't escape accountability a second time. Detective Coleman asked me to cooperate fully with the investigation. That meant staying silent, not alerting Linda, not confronting Ryan, attending family gatherings and acting normal while the case was constructed around them. 2 weeks of deception. 2 weeks of sitting across from people who had stolen from my grandmother, smiled at her funeral, and divided her estate like they were entitled to it. Thanksgiving dinner at Linda's house was excruciating. Linda's turkey has always been a crime against poultry. Dry, flavorless, cooked with the enthusiasm of someone who views food as an obligation. But that night it seemed fitting. Here I was, choking down disappointment while seated across from a woman who had made disappointment her entire profession. Linda discussed the estate sale. She had found buyers for most of the furniture. Good prices, quick transactions. Ryan nodded along, mentioned a new investment opportunity he was pursuing. They were so confident, so certain they had succeeded. After dinner, Linda pulled me aside. Her voice was soft, concerned, maternal, the performance of a lifetime. "I know we haven't always been close," she said, "but we're family. Your grandmother would want us to support each other." I kept my expression neutral. "Of course, Linda. Family first." For 2 weeks, I had to pretend I didn't know my stepmother was essentially a con artist. Every time she called to complain about traffic or restaurant service, I wanted to say, "You know what's really inconvenient, Linda? Federal prosecution." But I waited. I documented. I trusted the process. My grandmother taught me about antiques when I was young. Her favorite lesson? The most valuable pieces aren't always the most obvious ones. Sometimes the treasure is hidden beneath the surface, waiting for someone patient enough to look. She had spent her final years setting this trap. She knew she wouldn't witness it close, but she knew I would. The call came on a Wednesday morning. Detective Coleman's voice was calm and professional. "Miss Foster, we're executing the warrants today. Arrests will happen simultaneously. I thought you'd want to know." I thanked her, disconnected, sat in silence for a long moment. Linda was about to lose everything. Ryan was about to discover that betrayal has a price, and my grandmother's patience was finally about to be rewarded. The arrests occurred at 7 in the morning, coordinated precisely. No warning, no opportunity for them to communicate, coordinate stories, or destroy evidence. Detective Coleman had orchestrated it perfectly. I wasn't present, but Coleman described the details later, and I admit there was satisfaction in hearing them. Linda answered her door, still in her bathrobe, coffee mug in hand. She saw the badges and uniforms, and for just a moment, her mask slipped. I imagined she looked like a woman watching her entire carefully constructed life collapse. Coleman presented the warrant. Read the charges: fraud, forgery, elder financial abuse, theft. Linda attempted one final manipulation. Her voice was measured, reasonable, the voice of a woman who had talked her way out of trouble her entire life. "This is a misunderstanding," she said. "My mother-in-law had cognitive issues. She didn't understand what she was saying. I was protecting her." Coleman wasn't moved. "Ma'am, we have 8 years of documented evidence. A notarized statement from your mother-in-law, witnessed by her attorney. Storage facility records of your attempted unauthorized access. Bank records showing exactly where the money went. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is accountability." Linda was handcuffed and escorted to the police car. No screaming, no dramatic scene, just the quiet death of a lie that had lasted over a decade. Across town at the same moment, Ryan was at his apartment. He was preparing for work when the officers arrived. I heard he went completely pale, tried to explain there must be some confusion, tried to mention his attorney. The officers weren't interested in negotiations. Ryan was cuffed in his own living room. His reputation died in that moment. Whatever image he had cultivated, whatever success he had projected, it evaporated. You don't recover from being arrested for money laundering in your own home. The case proceeded through the courts over the following months. I attended some of the hearings, watched the evidence accumulate, watched Linda's confident expression gradually dissolve as the scope of the prosecution's case became apparent. Her attorney tried everything, claimed Helen was cognitively impaired, so her statement was invalid. The prosecution brought 3 physicians who had examined my grandmother over the years. All 3 testified that Helen showed no signs of dementia. She was sharp, coherent, aware. The competency concerns, they explained, had been based on exaggerated information provided by Linda herself. She had manipulated the medical system to ensure no one would believe my grandmother when she said she was being robbed. The judge was not sympathetic. Ryan's attorney tried a different approach. He contacted me privately with an offer. Ryan would testify against his mother in exchange for reduced charges. He claimed he had been manipulated, that he didn't understand the full scope, that he was a victim too. The lawyer delivered Ryan's message carefully. Your stepbrother says he wants to make amends. He's willing to cooperate completely. I considered it for approximately 5 seconds. Tell my stepbrother that my grandmother was an antique dealer, I said. She taught me that authentic items reveal themselves under examination, and fake ones always expose themselves eventually. It didn't matter anyway. The prosecutors weren't interested in Ryan's cooperation. The shell company proved he wasn't a passive recipient of family generosity. He had created corporate structures to conceal stolen money. He had signed documents. He had processed transfers. He knew exactly where the money originated. No deal. Full charges. The sentencing hearing was on a cold day in January, 4 months after the arrests. Federal courthouse, wood-paneled walls, the American flag hanging behind the judge's bench. Before the sentences were announced, the prosecutor asked to present a statement from the victim, from Helen. The courtroom went silent as she read the words aloud. My daughter-in-law stole my savings and my dignity. She convinced everyone I was confused while she emptied my accounts. No one believed me. But I am not confused. I know exactly what is being done to me, and I am leaving a record so that someday the truth will emerge. I watched Linda's face as those words filled the room. She stared straight ahead, expressionless, but her hands were trembling. Ryan wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked diminished somehow, smaller. The confident, successful stepbrother who had always looked down on me had vanished. In his place was just a man who had gambled everything on a lie and lost. The judge delivered the sentences. Linda Foster, 8 years in federal prison, no possibility of early parole, full restitution ordered. Everything she owned would be liquidated and returned to the estate. Ryan Foster, 4 years in federal prison, felony conviction that would follow him permanently. His business reputation, his social standing, his carefully constructed image of success, all of it was finished. I sat in that courtroom and felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not vindication, just a quiet sense of completion, like a story finally reaching its proper ending. After the hearing, Detective Coleman found me in the hallway. Your grandmother would be proud, she said. She fought for years. You completed it. I thanked her, shook her hand, walked out of the courthouse into the cold January air. Later, Ryan's attorney contacted me one more time, asked if I would consider visiting my stepbrother in prison. He said Ryan wanted to apologize, wanted to explain. I said I would think about it. I'm still thinking. It's been 8 months. I'll probably continue thinking. Some apologies arrive too late to matter. Some explanations don't deserve an audience. My phone buzzed. A text from Theodore Patterson, my grandmother's attorney. Your grandmother left one more thing for you. A final item. When you're ready, come to my office. One more surprise. One more move from beyond. Helen wasn't finished yet. I visited Theodore Patterson's office 3 days after the sentencing. The January wind was bitter, but the sun was bright, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Patterson was waiting for me with tea and a single envelope on his desk. My name was written on the front in my grandmother's careful handwriting. She asked me to give this to you after everything was resolved, Patterson said. She was very particular about the timing. She wanted you to read it when you could appreciate what it meant. I took the envelope. It felt light, just paper, but I knew it contained something immeasurably heavy. Before I opened it, Patterson explained the legal outcome. The $2.3 million in the storage unit was now mine. Helen's will, kept safely with Patterson for years, explicitly named me as the sole beneficiary. Linda and Ryan were specifically excluded, with documentation explaining why. Additionally, the restitution process had commenced. Assets seized from Linda and Ryan would be liquidated and added to the estate. The house sale proceeds, which Linda had planned to keep for herself, would come to me instead. Total inheritance, once everything was processed, would be approximately $2.7 million. I nodded, but the money felt abstract, distant. What I really wanted was in that envelope. I opened it carefully. Inside were 2 pages covered in my grandmother's handwriting. The letter was dated 6 weeks before her death. My dearest Megan, it began. If you're reading this, then you found the music box. You followed the trail. You did what I knew you would do. I want you to understand why I chose you. Your stepbrother was always his mother's son. I watched him grow up, learning her values, taking shortcuts, believing that appearance matters more than substance. I hoped he would change. But hope is not a strategy. An antique dealer knows better than to trust hope. Linda never cared about me. She cared about what I represented, access to assets she could control. When your father married her, I tried to give her a chance. But I recognized what she was almost immediately. I've spent 50 years identifying fakes. Linda was one of the most convincing I'd ever encountered. I knew what she was doing almost from the beginning. I spent 50 years examining objects, spotting inconsistencies, identifying frauds. Did she really think I wouldn't notice my own money disappearing? But I was trapped. She had legal authority. She had convinced everyone I was declining mentally. Every time I tried to fight back, she tightened her control. Every time I tried to speak up, she silenced me. So, I did what I do best. I documented. I preserved. I waited. Patience reveals what haste conceals. I hid what I could, built the evidence, left instructions with Theodore, and I trusted you to finish what I started. You were always different from the rest of them. You visited me because you wanted to, not because you expected something. You listened to my stories about the antiques. You asked questions that made Linda nervous. You never accepted easy answers. That's why I chose you. Because I knew that when you found the music box, you wouldn't stop until you found the truth. And I knew that when you found the truth, you would do what was right. I'm sorry for the burden I've placed on you. I'm sorry you have to be the one to expose your own family. I know it won't be simple. I know there will be pain. But I also know that you're strong enough to carry it. Live well, Megan. Use the resources for something meaningful. Build something that lasts. Find happiness. I spent my final years fighting a battle I couldn't win alone, but I made sure you would win it for me. Thank you for being the granddaughter I always hoped for. With all my love, Grandma Helen. I sat in Theodore Patterson's office and let the tears come. Not grief tears, something deeper, something that felt like healing. My grandmother had seen me, truly seen me. In a family where I had always felt like an outsider, she had recognized something authentic in me, and she had trusted me with the most important thing she had. Not just assets, justice. That was 8 months ago. I left my job at the accounting firm, paid off my debts, bought a small storefront downtown, a narrow space with large windows and good light. I opened an antique shop, the kind of place with comfortable seating and the smell of history and objects with stories waiting to be discovered. I named it Foster's Finds, which my grandmother would have appreciated. She always valued a meaningful name. In the back corner, there's a display case containing the music box with the dancing ballerina. The key is mounted beside it. Sometimes customers ask about its story. Above the case hangs a framed photograph of my grandmother, standing in her own shop 50 years ago, young and determined and ready to build something meaningful. And next to it, in a simple wooden frame, her favorite saying, "Patience reveals what haste conceals." Linda writes letters from prison sometimes, long rambling letters full of accusations and excuses and demands for forgiveness. She says, I betrayed the family. She says, I destroyed everything. She says, I owe her. I don't respond. Some doors, once closed, stay closed. Ryan's girlfriend left him. His friends vanished. When he's released from prison, he'll have a felony record and nothing to show for all those years of supposed success. The people who had everything because they stole it now have nothing. And me? I have an antique shop. I have peace. I have the knowledge that my grandmother spent her final years fighting for justice, and I was the one who delivered it.